welcome back to Church is a Team Sport podcast. I'm Lance Wigton. I'm a communication director here at Real Life Ministries. And again, I'm with Jim Putman, our senior pastor here at Real Life Ministries. And we're talking to you, pastors at smaller churches that are looking for answers. And we would love to give those to you. As I've said in earlier podcasts, Jim and I are both from smaller churches and our dads were preachers. So we are very vested in making sure that you feel supported out there. Jim, today, just like in chapter 5 of the book, is building a winning team. Right now in our culture, we have a lot of questions from people about where do you find elders? Where do you find staff? And it feels like there's a shortage of qualified people. What would your answer to those people be?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do get the question, what do we do to raise up elders or shift the way elders see eldership? What do we do with, raising up staff? Because the Bible colleges, there's a huge shortage right now of available trained pastors. Many of the pastors who've been doing it for years, like I think I saw a study, 70% of them are trying to find a different job, trying to get out because it's a rough time to be a pastor.
Those are bad numbers when you think about attrition and how long people are going to be in any job.
Right. So, and pastors are notorious for bouncing around from place to place anyway, and which is why oftentimes people leave from church to church to church. Their pastors have been doing that for years. And so it's God called me over there. God called me over here. We're friendly, but we're not really in relationship, because if we were, it would actually be painful to leave their family. Mm-hmm. But instead, we are called somewhere else where it's easier, where, we haven't burned out the people around us or we got fired or whatever. So, when we started here, as you remember, we didn't have money to bring on staff. We couldn't afford to pay people, that wanted the job. We had very little money, but we also, we had a mindset. I had a sports mindset where we talk about the difference between a college coach and a high school coach in Church is a Team Sport. A college coach goes around the country trying to develop already pretty skilled players to give them scholarship. And then, of course, they'll coach them from there. Mm-hmm. Whereas in a high school program, you can't recruit outside of your own school zone.
Right.
So if you're going to have players, you have to develop them from nothing right there. You can't go around and take already developed players unless somebody moves in, but it doesn't happen very often.
Right. You can't count on that.
Yeah. So you have to start a little kids program, a junior high program, and a high school program. And what you want is a program that teaches the same fundamentals at the lowest level as a little kid that you can build on as they go to junior high and high school. You want to have a common language. You want to have a common understanding. You want coaches that are aligned, that care about what wrestling style or moves you're going to teach, but also shape and character. And you build a program. It takes a while to do that. And, you're trying to raise up players who can play, mm-hmm. but also out of that, some of these guys have coaching capabilities. Mm-hmm. And then you, as the time goes by, you invite some of the kids that graduate to become your coaches. And even, you ask some of your high schoolers to help coach your junior hires, some of the junior hires to help coach your little kids, and you build a program where there's a language and a common skill set, and you're helping these kids grow not only as wrestlers, but as coaches of wrestling, which then they graduate, they have kids, and now they're teaching their kids in 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And so when they come to your program, you've got a partnership between the home and the wrestling program. Mm-hmm. And really all that is right there in Scripture. That's really the way it was supposed to be in Scripture. You're developing people and you're raising people up. And then the homes start getting a vision for what a home's supposed to look like, what work's supposed to look like. You're discipling them. Mm-hmm. Here's the skills. This is what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. And it's in every sphere of your life. And here's what it looks like. And now you're starting to raise up kids who are a part of this spiritual community, in the wrestling community or the basketball community. It becomes every year you're a championship team, and And then, as you raise up, kids move somewhere else. Now they start a program at a different high school. And, some of my favorite coaches I mentioned back then when I wrote the book was like, New England's or, Belichick or
Mm-hmm.
Krzyzewski in basketball, where, these guys are raising up coaches now that are taking other programs. And in the church, you want to raise up people, you want to raise a program, a ministry, church community right here, but it's always was supposed to go to Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. Now you're sending out disciple makers. That's what the first church did. That's what we're called to do.
I guess that's my frustration over the whole thing is, you talk about coaching in the book, and which makes a lot of sense. But the reality is discipleship, just like you said, it's all in the Bible. Discipleship is development. It is coaching. It is the same thing. And yet you were just talking about how other churches are frustrated because the factory that is the Bible college is not producing the product they need. And the product that they're looking for is a already developed person that can plug and play, just like I would order something from Amazon and then in 4 or 5 days it shows up at my door. Yep. But the reality is, it's just like you're saying, the benefits of discipleship, relationship, and coaching is they don't even have the expectation to do that, and that's why they're frustrated. And I'm thinking, I don't even understand why they want to do that in the first place, because that's really what it's all about.
Well, it's because we actually delegated the development process to a Bible college. And again, I'm not against Bible college, because without the Bible college now, because the churches don't do their job, you wouldn't have ministries. And now as the Bible college starts to struggle, that process in America, again, what's it left to? The church doesn't have enough pastors, doesn't have enough trained pastors. And the problem with the Bible college system is you send these 18 to 22-year-olds there, and now they may have the Bible college training, but they're 22. And you got most of your people that are 35 and 40 and have kids and have a secular job. They never had a secular job unless they, as a kid, they do it. They don't know what it's like to have a secular job, raise a family, and be in a church. So their understanding of what it's supposed to look like as a young person going into, I'm supposed to teach all these older people, are they even going to respect me? Probably not, because you're 22 and you just got married maybe, and you haven't been proven over time.
Right.
And the system itself doesn't work that way. And it's not been working, and which is, again, most kids, they do all these, from Christian kids going to Bible college, the pastors will go, we're going to send a bunch of kids to Bible college. If you go to these Bible colleges, they usually have a biblical worldview sort of test. What's your biblical literacy rate? And when they do these biblical literacy rates from kids that are sent to Bible college, it's usually 20, 30% on the test, which means that they were waiting to send you to Bible college for you to learn the Bible, really. And most of them didn't serve in any way. So they don't have any skill sets in serving. They're going to learn that at Bible college. And again, this doesn't work. And it never was going to. Somewhere along the line, maturity meant education. And then what happens is when they're sent out from their home becomes wherever they get the job. And it's a job, ministry is a job, and it leads to this bouncing around all over the place to a new job, stepping stones to higher levels of leadership, And again, I think it's rife with so when a guy sends me his resume, it's usually their education. They usually bounced around from, to several different churches. The fact that they bounced around to several different churches meant that was easy for them to do. So how tight are their relationships? What kind of support system do they have? Whereas if you raise kids from within, you have these kids who have a family, a spiritual family, connection, support system. They learned to serve and understand the word. And it's not just a training system, but it's a vetting system, right? As they get married, and they have a spiritual family around them, it strengthens their their rooting system. So when the wind blows, they don't just topple over. We know what they can do because we've seen it. And then everybody's called to make a disciple. If you can't make a disciple, why would I put you into a role of leading a disciple-making system? If you aren't making a disciple in your home, then how are you going to teach somebody to make a disciple in their home? If you're not sharing your faith, how are you going to teach somebody else to do that? And so as our kids grow up, they then become our best small group leaders because they've been doing this since they were little.
Right.
They have a spiritual family. Some are called to all of them are called to be disciples. Some are actually called to be coaches and be paid. Some are going to be elders. And how do I know they should be elders? Over time, they have a root system. They've been vetted. They've been trained. They've lived it out. I know what I'm getting rather than a resume that you send me that I can't verify in any way.
Right. So you say develop players or develop people in different environments. I really think of it as this is kind of a bizarre analogy, but it just hit me, and you know how that happens. Salmon ladders. They have one rung on the ladder, which really looks more like a little tiny pool. They got to jump from that one up to the next one. That having an environment for people to play, I really feel like that's what it looks like, and I think. Or I'm afraid that when you say that, and there's a church leader out there that's hearing that, is I need to build a system, and what they're going to do is I need to have a class, I need to have this, I need to have that. It is way more like boots on the ground, and you don't know who's going to come out of that pool to go to the next ladder. Sometimes somebody you thought was going to do great, they never make it. They never grow, and they don't do the things that they're supposed to, or something happens, just like the parables of the soil. We're talking about a 25% success rate. Same thing goes for leadership. Not everybody in the pool is going to make that next jump and develop into the person, but you know who they are because they've actually made the jump.
Yeah, I know who's a leader because people are following them.
Mm-hmm.
I know what kind of leader they are by watching how they lead. It's like if you use sports, right? The job of a coach is to not only do some training on what it looks like, but then give them an environment where you can watch them play. Now I know how to coach them.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know where they're weak so I can help them. Now I know how to challenge them. Now I know who goes in what position and where, because I actually get a chance to see them play and put them in positions where I can understand what their skill sets are. So whereas everybody's a disciple and should be making disciples, not everybody's called or gifted to be a group leader or to be a staff member, ministry head, even a high-level ministry volunteer. And the problem for most pastors is they're so busy playing all the positions that they don't have the time to put people in positions where they can see how they play. They don't have the time to coach. They don't have the time to raise them up. And, we use this analogy, I think, a few weeks ago. I know we did in the book, where people will come here and go, they'll go through our DS1s, our discipleship sort of experiences. And at the end of it, their debrief with me is, well, we just don't have leaders like you have.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have leaders like that guy that's leading our small group because everything's experiential. Or we don't have that guy that was able to speak like that. And then I'm always like, let me introduce you to him and let me tell you his backstory. He owned a Mongolian barbecue. He was, the guys even in this room that are filming this are working on the podcast. They had secular jobs. They were Greg Turbin, a saw filer at the mill, Corey Spear, a butcher, Jim Blazin, a cabinet maker, Gabe Cleve, a manager of a retail store. Blake Whiteman ran a medical office. Brandon Ginnon ran a medical office, and these are guys that were diamonds in the rough, but it had to take somebody to actually make them diamonds. They had to be willing to go through the process. There's a lot of people who are capable but aren't willing to go through the process. and they had to be coached and be led and given opportunity. And what happens again is we don't have the right idea of what a church is. It's not something you go to. It's not just information you learn from. It's not a class. It has those components, but it's a relational environment. It's service opportunities. It's a vetting process and a development process when it's used the way it was supposed to be used.
Mm-hmm.
And now the elders I have, I'm asking guys to do something I already know they can do. I know what their family looks like. I know how they fight when they're mad. I know what they do when they got upset or disappointed. I know that they're living this lifestyle out. And so I'm not saying, now don't live out that lifestyle anymore and take on this eldership role. Mm-hmm. I'm saying you have the ability to add to your life an eldership role. You're in the season of life that's lived this out. You meet the qualifications, able to teach. I know because I've seen you teach. You're managing your household. I know your family. I know what your weaknesses are, your strengths are. I know how to have relationship with you. We've done it. Mm-hmm. Now I'm inviting you into a position where I know what I'm getting. That doesn't mean people can't change and make mistakes and you don't have to have hard conversations. But you start from such a higher place than if I go, who's a business leader around here and who has time and who's willing? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that are willing to step into a leadership position and see it as a privilege rather than a responsibility, and who will take it, and you don't know whether they can do it. They don't even know whether they can do it. And then you're stuck with an elder that will tell other people what to do, but won't actually live out the life. They're not. Right. They'll tell the staff what to do, but they're not living it out. They'll make decisions behind the scenes about things that are just ideas in their head, not with the practical understanding of what it looks like to live that out, and aren't doing so personally.
But you're absolutely right. It all comes down to, what is my mindset? Am I going to coach and develop and watch people and see who emerges from the pool and see who is going to be that next leader and invite them, excuse me, into that role. But if I don't have the mindset of developing and coaching, I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. And then I would turn around and come to a DS1 and ask you, where do you? We don't have those leaders. We need to get more leaders like that. And
can I have one of yours?
Yeah. Because I want to go to Amazon. I want to look up leaders, and I need to get 5 by next Wednesday. That's what I'm looking for.
The problem is if I give you some of those leaders, first of all, they're not mine to give. Right? I mean, God's got to call them. But if I give you these kinds of guys who are who they are in part because of the boundaries in their life, the support they have, the team they're on, the relationships they have, and I'm going to send them to you where they don't have all these things that have made them that kind of person, and you're not that kind of person, you don't create a culture where this can start there and thrive there, and you just want to hire these people who have an idea of how to develop people, but you're not a coach, you're actually still a player. I just set our people up to be burned out mm-hmm. and torched and to leave the lifestyle that helped them become who they were. Our people all have limps. Mm-hmm. Every one of them. The system, the relationships around them, the people with them have helped them become who they are and hold them there. And they all, if you think you're going to get some perfect person who doesn't have a limp, they do, but the relationships around them help them become the best version of them. Take away all those other things, well, that puts them at risk. Even if they've got it together and they can start building it, if you won't live it out as the leader and coach that and live that out, then now they're going to always be looking at you going, you're not living this out. Right. This isn't going to ever become this if you don't live this out.
Right.
And so you're the top of the culture. You're the ceiling, and the culture will never become the culture because I send them to you and you're not willing to actually learn and live that out yourself. I'm not going to put our people at risk in that.
Which is certainly a suspicion. Otherwise, I would be asking for your people.
Right.
They'd be asking
for...
No,
I'm not saying if you have the right heart and attitude, you're willing to learn, that sometimes our people aren't called to go there.
Right.
But sometimes our people have been called to go there and been torched.
Right. And that's why.
And then they end up coming back, or they push through and maybe somehow they're able to get the culture going and all that. Sometimes we plant churches that way. But the biggest thing is this. Unless we start living out the Christian faith as it was designed in Scripture, God will work in spite of it because he wants to save people, and he'll work with broken people, but it'll never be what it was supposed to be because it's never built on his design. And you look at Paul raising up Timothy and Titus and guys that didn't have a dad. Timothy didn't have a dad that knew the Lord. He became his spiritual father. He raised them up. He developed them. Right now he's sending them out and he's telling them to do the same thing. You see in the scriptures this development, modeling. Not everybody's a leader, but everybody is a disciple who makes disciples. And it's being lived out at the top. It's something every person can live out. But when a leader emerges, and you start to see they have that capability, now, just because they have the capability doesn't mean they're going to be willing to be humble and be coached and put the effort in and do, like you said, the salmon run, right? But you're still encouraging them to become the best version of them, and they get to decide. There's God's part, my part, their part.
That's right. One of the things, Jim, I want to ask you about is, it's easy to see if I'm in a church and I took over the smaller church, it's easy to go, well, yeah, but you started as a church planter, you started afresh, you could do whatever you want to. And I get that, and you and I both get that because we've seen that. That's a reality. What would you do if you became a senior pastor at a church, but it already had elders, and now you're talking about all this alignment and you guys got to be on the same page working together? What would you do with an existing group of elders?
Yeah, that's good, because what's happening is typically these existing churches are built off the old system. And you're talking about coming in with a new approach. So the old system says, we send out our Bible college, our kids to Bible college. We find a kid from Bible college. We bring him in. The elders lead, and you're hiring a minister, and there's a way that they were chosen, usually because they've been around the longest. Maybe they somewhere in the past, they were a Bible college person, but again, they came from the old system where your job is to teach, and you're successful if people come to listen to you teach. You're a good teacher. People come, they give, and your job is to do the shepherding, the pastoring, and sometimes those guys will actually do some of that stuff. Sometimes they might be in a Sunday school class or whatever, but ultimately you're the one, and you're hiring a team to take care of it. It's a hire it done sort of mentality.
Right.
And so here you come and you're like, wait a minute, I got elders who are a different system. I want to raise up a different system. How do I do that? Well, first, it takes time. You can't turn the ship too fast, or the thing goes over the side. So you have to build relationship. You have to build influence. You have to start talking and sharing with them about what does it look like to do something different. You might give them a book to read and again, remember, they haven't done it that way before.
Right.
If they are elders, they probably love Jesus, but there was a way they were taught to do it. Sometimes in a small church, you've got controlling elders who it's their church, and it's the way they want it. And
maybe if they've been there their whole life, 40 years or whatever.
They put their years in. And so you've got to shift those guys starting at the top. At the same time, you need to start, if you have a small staff or whatever, you've got to start discipling and living out a specific thing. One thing I always say is, do not announce the revolution. Do not come in and go, we're changing everything. You go slow, but you can start discipling people in small groups, right? You can start, usually they're not going to care if you do a Bible study, call it a Bible study, but it's really a discipleship group, and there's a difference. We'll probably go through that at some time through this. I'm not a small groups guy. I'm a discipleship in small groups, and there's a way to do that. A small group doesn't necessarily mean people are becoming mature in Christ, but what's got to happen is you got to spend time with the leaders, get to know them, care about them, be respectful of them because they're the authority of that church, and slowly but surely, at the pace at which you can start to influence the elders to lead a different direction. And sometimes, unfortunately, some of them will get it, some of them won't. And sometimes it leads to all right, well, somebody's got to step back because there's a battle for control, but you don't fight like the devil for the things of God. You don't gossip, you don't slander, you don't split a church. One of the things that we have in our churches we developed as a part with some other folks called the Relational Discipleship Network. It's a network where guys go, I want to help shift our church, and it's being led by pastors who have already shifted the church. So they've already had to live it out, change a church that's 100 years old or 30 years old or 200 years old or whatever, with a different philosophy, and they walk you through how to slowly do that the right way depending on your circumstances. So to have guys who have done that, who are helping you to coach you not just how to be a disciple-making pastor and how to lead discipleship groups, but how to change organizational systems so that they become disciple-making teams. That would be a place I would point people to, is the Relational Discipleship Network.
Yeah, for sure. And you made the point about slowly but surely. I don't know if you can emphasize that point enough, because a lot of times we're like, okay, we had the conversation, we're doing the vision cast, and they're not on board, and now I'm frustrated, and now we're going to make some wholesale changes. That's suicide, and it's just going to take way longer than you want it to.
Yeah. And again, there will come a time where I left a church because they did not want to change. The eldership did not want to change. They were doing it their way. They didn't want to make disciples. And there's a time to leave a church. And I did. But it's done. It wasn't my church. Some people are like, well, let's just start a church down the street. No, that's a church split. That's not a church plant. You can call it whatever you want. It's not your church to split. I moved to Idaho. That's how this started. But we've worked with so many churches that over time have been able to, because of who they are, Christ followers, influential, they have been able to shift churches. And it can be done. It happens all the time. Shifting
a church, not changing, not leaving the church, but
shifting a church they're in over time. Yeah. And again, it starts at the top, but that doesn't mean you can't make disciples in a small group, in a men's group, whatever. And so you're making disciples at the same time as you're trying to go at the pace of the authority of the eldership. You're working through that. And so sometimes it's time to go and lead and go someplace where they'll let you become a disciple-making church. But again, that's shifting people's mindset. We had to shift people's. I still remember in the first meeting, I said, well, what's a church? And everybody had a different idea of what it was. And how are we going to do all this? Well, we're not. It's time for us to get away from our version of it and go, let's study the word and go, what does he say it is? And then lead people towards that. It's not easy in a church plant. And you're only a church plant for a while. We've been at this 25 years now. And, we've had to make shifts along the way too. And it can be done, not everywhere and not always fast. And there are nuances, but you're called, if you're a pastor, to be a disciple-making pastor. You have to do that. How you do that depends on we're called to be a church, but in a culture, we may not be able to have a big church building. We may have to have house churches. We may have to meet 2 a.m, but you're still called to do something no matter what the context. You cannot be okay with what the church has become when it doesn't look like God's church. We can shift it. We can change it. But if it says, no, this is who we are, and you have to fit in the box that we handed you that isn't the biblical box, I can't do that.
And the same goes for the other side too, when it's growth, and you can't let the growth now change what your priority is.
You started with the growth.
Yeah.
With the small groups like we did, and then there were times where like, wait a minute, the numbers are overwhelming our small groups. We can't go, well, we won't be about discipleship anymore.
Right.
No, it's like, all right, I don't care about the numbers, and I don't care if I do care if we're going to lose some people, but if I have to lose people so that we continue to make disciples, so be it. We are going to be God's church that makes disciples, and we may have to change from doing it at our church with childcare and different rooms to multiple houses and multiple campuses. But at the end of the day, are we making disciples that make disciples as Jesus defines it? Are we a church as Jesus defines it?
Absolutely. Jim, I appreciate answering that question. We do like answering your questions. If you do have a question about these topics, info@jimputman.com. And Jim, for the next podcast, I do have a question for you already. It is, you're in the foyer after a sermon, people want to meet with you. Who do you decide that you're going to meet with now? And then also part of that question would be, early on, who did you decide that you needed to meet with?
That's a great question.
And spend time with? All right, we'll see you next time then.